He looked me in the eyes and said the words that would change everything. "You are good, but not good enough for a raise. Be thankful you even have this job." For a moment, I just sat there in his office, stunned into silence. My mind played back the months of extra hours I had worked, the weekends I had sacrificed, the projects I had carried on my back while he left early to play golf. I had trained new employees, saved contracts, pulled in clients that had doubled our revenue. And yet, when it came time to ask for the raise I had earned, he dismissed me with a smirk. I walked out of that office with a knot in my stomach, the walls of the building pressing down on me like a cage. My coworkers glanced up from their desks, curious, but I did not say a word. The humiliation was written all over my face. He wanted me small. He wanted me obedient. He wanted me to keep giving him my best while he gave me scraps. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, anger burning through the exhaustion. Imagine working yourself to the bone, pouring every ounce of energy into something, only to be told you should be grateful for crumbs. The more I replayed it, the clearer it became. I could not keep living like this. If he thought I was not worth more, then maybe I should stop giving him anything at all. But it was the walk home that changed everything. As I passed the row of shops near our office, I noticed one space with a for lease sign glowing faintly in the window. An empty storefront, right next door to his business. I stopped, staring at it, my mind racing. The thought hit me like lightning. Dangerous, ridiculous, thrilling. What if I started something of my own? What if I built a place that stood right next to his, close enough for him to see every day what he had thrown away? The idea was insane. I had no investors, no backup plan, no safety net. But as I stood there staring at that vacant shop, the humiliation I had felt hours earlier transformed into something sharper. A spark of defiance. A whisper that said, "If he will not give you a raise, give yourself a crown." That night, I made a decision. I would not beg him again. I would not wait for his approval. I would take the very skills he exploited, the very talents he undervalued, and I would build something so strong, so undeniable, that every time he looked out his window, he would see the proof of his mistakes staring right back at him. And with that thought, the plan began to take root. Fear was the first enemy. It crept in the moment I let the idea settle. Starting a business was not a simple step. It was a leap into fire. I had no investors, no wealthy family to catch me if I fell, no cushion of savings large enough to soften the blow. All I had was the knowledge I had built while working for him, the clients I had helped secure, and the quiet belief that I could do better on my own. But fear has a way of shrinking when anger grows stronger. Every time I remembered his smirk, every time I replayed his words, "Be thankful you even have this job," the fear loosened its grip. I told myself, if I can make his company money, I can make mine thrive. So I began building with nothing but scraps. I cut my personal expenses to the bone. No nights out, no luxuries, no wasted dollars. I picked up freelance work after hours, saving every cent like it was gold. My weekends turned into marathons of planning, researching, sketching out business models at the kitchen table with nothing but coffee and stubborn determination to keep me awake. Slowly, I pieced it together. I knew the market because I had lived inside it every single day working for him. I knew the client's complaints, the flaws in his service, the corners he cut to save a dime. I had the blueprint not because I had studied it from afar, but because I had helped build it for him while he refused to pay me fairly. I started reaching out quietly to contacts, people who had trusted me, not him. They remembered my late-night calls, my problem-solving, the way I treated them with respect. When I told them I was considering launching something new, something better, more honest, more efficient, their voices lit with interest. "If you do it," one said, "we would follow you in a heartbeat." That was the first taste of progress, the first proof that I was not chasing an impossible dream. For the first time in months, I felt hope instead of humiliation. When I finally signed the lease on that empty storefront next door, the pen shook in my hand. Not because I doubted, but because I knew. I knew that from this moment forward, there was no turning back. My boss thought I was his employee, his tool, someone too desperate to leave. But I had just planted a flag right next to his empire. The walls of the empty shop were bare, the floors dusty, the air stale. To anyone else, it looked like nothing. To me, it looked like the battlefield where I would win back my dignity. And as I stood in that empty space for the first time, I whispered to myself, "This is where everything changes." The first months nearly broke me. Starting a business sounds bold when you say it out loud, but the reality is sweat, exhaustion, and moments when you wonder if you have completely lost your mind. I worked before sunrise and long after midnight. I painted the walls myself, scrubbed the floors until my hands blistered, and borrowed secondhand furniture to make the shop look presentable. Every dollar I saved went straight back into inventory, licenses, and marketing. There were nights when I slept on the office floor, wrapped in a thin blanket, the hum of the old heater lulling me into restless dreams. Some mornings, I stood in front of the mirror, pale-eyed and weary, asking myself if I was strong enough to keep going. But each time doubt whispered, anger answered louder. I remembered the smirk on his face, the condescending tone, and it lit the fire all over again. The first customer who walked through my door is a moment etched in my memory forever. A woman, cautious but curious, holding one of my flyers in her hand. I treated her with the respect I had always wished for in my old job. She smiled, thanked me, and left with a purchase. It was not much money, but it felt like $1,000,000. It was proof that I could do this. And slowly, word began to spread. People who had grown tired of his arrogance, his sloppy service, and his inflated prices started to trickle into my shop. Some came quietly, glancing nervously toward his building next door, as though betraying a king. But once they tasted the difference, the care, the honesty, the fair prices, they returned. And they brought others with them. Meanwhile, cracks began to show in his empire. I could see it from my front window. Fewer cars in his parking lot. Fewer deliveries coming in. The staff, once bustling, now leaned idly against counters, their faces tense. From where I stood, I could hear him sometimes through the thin walls, his voice raised in frustration during meetings. He was noticing. But the real shift came one afternoon when I caught him standing outside his building, staring directly at mine. His arms were crossed, his jaw tight, his eyes narrowed with a kind of disbelief that bordered on fury. He had dismissed me as not valuable enough. And now, every day, his business was bleeding while mine was quietly growing right under his nose. The day he walked into my store was the day I knew the war had truly begun. He stepped inside, scanning the shelves, his lips curling into a sneer as he muttered, "So this is where you ended up." I smiled, steady and calm, and replied, "No, this is where I started." And in that moment, I saw it in his eyes, the first flicker of fear. From that day forward, the battle lines were clear. He was not just my old boss anymore. He was my competition. And while he had money, staff, and years of reputation behind him, I had something he could never buy: loyalty. Customers who once walked straight into his building began pausing at my door instead. They liked that I remembered their names, that I stayed late to help, that I answered their calls myself instead of passing them off. My prices were fair, my service honest, and slowly, people realized that what they had accepted from him for years was not good enough anymore. I watched from my window as cars that once filled his lot turned into empty spaces. Delivery trucks that once lined up outside his doors now stopped at mine. Even his own employees began slipping into my shop after hours, whispering about how frustrated they were with him, asking if I had openings. The more I grew, the more desperate he became. At first, he laughed it off. He told anyone who would listen that I would not last, that my shop was a cute little experiment, destined to fail. But when the laughter stopped working, he tried other tactics. He slashed his prices, cutting into his own profits to lure people back. He launched flashy advertisements, plastered his logo everywhere he could afford. He even spread rumors about me, lies meant to paint me as untrustworthy. But the truth has a way of shining through. His customers had seen how he treated people, and once they experienced the difference, they were not going back. Every desperate move he made only highlighted how much ground he was losing. The day one of his biggest clients walked into my store and signed with me instead was the day the balance shifted for good. It was a contract I had once managed for him. The same client I had saved from leaving years earlier, the work he had taken credit for when I asked for my raise. Now that client looked me in the eye, shook my hand, and said, "We trust you." We never really trusted him. That night, as I closed up shop, I stepped outside and looked at the two buildings standing side by side. His lights were dim, his staff scattered, his parking lot nearly empty. Mine glowed warm, buzzing with life, customers' laughter still echoing in my ears. The man who once told me to be grateful for crumbs now stood in the shadow of the business I had built from nothing. And for the first time, I realized something. This was no longer about revenge. This was about freedom. I was not just proving him wrong. I was proving myself right. But the sweetest moment was still to come, when he would have to face the truth out loud. It did not happen overnight, but the collapse was visible, undeniable, and brutal. His store, once the busiest on the block, now looked like a relic. Shelves sat half-stocked, phones rang unanswered, and employees disappeared one by one until the parking lot was more empty than full. I would see him pacing outside sometimes, phone pressed to his ear, his gestures sharp and frantic, his face carved with frustration that had once been reserved for people like me. The same man who told me I was not valuable enough was now watching his empire crumble at the hands of the very person he had underestimated. The confrontation came on a gray morning. I was unlocking my shop's front door when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to find him standing there, eyes tired, suit wrinkled, pride worn thin. For the first time, he did not look like a boss. He looked like a man who had lost. "You ruined me," he muttered, his voice cracked with exhaustion. "You stole my customers, my business, everything I built." I stared at him for a long moment, letting his words hang in the air. Then I shook my head. "No," I said quietly. "I did not steal anything. I earned it. You lost at the moment you decided I was not worth more than crumbs." His face fell, and with it, the last shred of arrogance I had ever seen in him. He walked away slowly, his shoulders hunched, swallowed by the silence of the empty street. As I stepped into my shop, I felt no guilt, no pity, only clarity. He had planted the seed of my success the day he denied me that raise. By trying to keep me small, he had forced me to grow bigger than him. Months later, his shop closed for good. The building sat vacant, a for lease sign hanging where his name once glowed. Meanwhile, my business thrived. We expanded, hired more staff, signed more contracts, and filled the street with life. Customers who had once thought there was only one option now laughed about how wrong they had been. Sometimes I would pass that empty storefront and think about the night I first saw the for lease sign next door. Back then, it had been nothing but a wild idea, a dangerous dream fueled by anger and humiliation. Now, it was the foundation of everything I had built. He had denied me a raise, but in doing so, he gave me something far greater, the fire to build an empire beside his ruins. So let me ask you, if someone tried to keep you small, would you bow your head and accept it, or would you rise so high that they had no choice but to watch you win?